If you've enjoyed the content we've made so far in 2024, we're asking you to pick up a Kinda Funny membership on patreon.com/kindafunny or youtube.com/kindafunnygames to say thanks as part of August's Kinda Funny membership drive. That 10 spot would get you access to more than 130 exclusive episodes of content. And to give you a taste, we're posting one of the exclusive Gregways just like this each and every Saturday and Sunday in August. On top of that, make sure you join us for weekly public happy hours where we take Patreon member calls live for everyone as previews of what a Kinda Funny membership gets you each and every month. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Gregway in the car. It's Wednesday, and of course, this morning at 7 a.m., PlayStation said, you know what? Tomorrow, state of play, motherfuckers. 14 games, 30 minutes of PlayStation goodness, PS5, worldwide, or PlayStation Studios. I'm old. And of course, PlayStation VR 2. So we're throwing things out the window. Today's Gamescast will, in fact, be our predictions for that. Tomorrow's will be us reacting to it after the fact. Of course, live reacting to it, then doing a post-show Gamescast. Probably streaming Helldivers a whole bunch before it, between Games Daily and it. So coming together quickly as it always does. But again, this is the point of the Nimble Gamescast in the schedule. So we are very excited for it. And of course, there's been enough scuttlebutt that we've been quietly readying ourselves for this. However, we're not here to talk about that shit. All right, motherfuckers. Instead, we're going to answer a question from Blaster Goblin, frequent contributor here on Patreon, and of course, the Kinda Funny worldwide ecosystem. Wrote in and basically said, "Hey Greg, how do you prepare to interview somebody, and what are the keys to a great interview?" Which I thought was a fantastic question that I really, really, really love. Great question, Blaster Goblin. I could write a dissertation on that, and I think there's a million different layers to it. I think the key to a great interview is asking the obvious questions. I think that is easier than it can sound. I think it takes years of practice. And I think the main key to asking the obvious questions is actively listening. We will now go into a million different crazy Greg stories and strewn about anecdotes and yada, 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 right? But active listening is what it's all about. And then it's about asking the obvious question. I go back all the time to when I was in journalism school. And of course, writing for the school papers in high school and grades, or junior high, I guess, before then and stuff like that. And how much I hated interviewing people, right? I distinctly have a, seared in memory of being at the Antler House, which of course where I lived in college, having my notepad, my legal yellow notepad filled with questions, and calling whoever I was calling to interview, right? And I think it was when I was doing this Cops and Courts story for J105, for Journalism 105 at Mizzou, where we had to go to court for a day, sit in, just watch all these cases, pick a case to write a story about. And so I had sat in on this kid who got arrested for graffiti, who was then blah, blah. And so then I had to go track him down through the phone book and this, that, the other, blah, blah. Finally got the kid's number. And because I'm saying kid, he must have, I was probably, we'll say 19, maybe I was 20, but somewhere in there, right? And he was probably also a teenager, maybe a little bit older, I don't know. But he was a kid, just like me. And I remember having the phone receiver to my ear, the yellow pad and the paper, and I remember my hand shaking, and I remember just being like, don't answer the phone. Don't answer the phone. I was so hopeful this kid wouldn't answer the phone, so that, of course, I could then write the assignment and say, well, I couldn't get in touch with the person, you know what I mean? Get out of it. Of course, the kid answered. I had to interview him, asked him all my questions, yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. The epilogue to that story is, it was the first time, in this class where one of my mentors, Tom Morover from Mizzou, at the time, the editor-in-chief or whatever they called it, he was the head honcho of the Columbia Missourian, the paper that, one of the daily papers one of the daily papers in Columbia that his entire staff of reporters was students because it was part of the thing. This is why Missouri is so great. Anyways, doesn't matter. He was a mentor and, somebody I really, really looked up to. We're in the class. And at the end of class, we turn in these assignments, I forget when. At the end of this class, he's like, I'm paraphrasing because I don't really fully remember it, right? Because I was so stunned. he's like, one of your articles was so good that I want everyone to read it between this class and next so that we can come in and talk about what it was. And he threw it up and it was my article. He's like, it was Miller's article. And he's like, well, go through and read it. And then and then he's like, I'll also tell you everything that's wrong with it. Because obviously not to give me a big head. I was, a kid in class. But that was such a fulfilling moment for me. And it doesn't really help with the interview thing as much as like the work paid off, if that makes sense, right? So stick with me then. So I, of course, then continue to work at continue my journalism degree at Mizzou, continue doing the journalism classes, work at the Missourian. Like I said, the whole shtick there is that the editors and the bosses are, former journalists. They are your professors. They are employed by the university and the paper, right, to make the paper every day. And then the staff is all the reporters and photographers and et cetera and layout people. They're all students. So you're doing your class and then you come here and you work for a semester at the paper, right? It's an awesome program. I do all that, do a million different interviews, do a whole bunch of different stuff, yada, yada, yada. Work for the magazine they did, blah, 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 blah. Then I go, of course, to the Columbia Tribune, worked there for a year and a half as a general assignment reporter. Of course, I eventually, with 6 months, my final 6 months there, get my video game column and blog, which changed my life. But before then, and even during that, I was still reporting, interviewing, cold calling, showing up on doorsteps, knocking on doors, all, just fucking getting it, interviewing people every day, multiple times a day. That was the job. That was the thing. Shorthand on my reporter's notepad, blah, 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 blah. You get to IGN, and part of the rise of Greg Miller at IGN is the fact that, and I'm not at all insulting anybody, this is what I was told, This isn't me getting a big head or talking shit about any of my comrades at IGN at the time, because obviously there's been a lot of turnover since then. But it was the idea that people quickly noticed that I was one of, if not the best interviewer at the time at the company. And that's why you saw it go from first off, nobody being on the E3 live shows, right? Then sprinkling the editors throughout the E3 live shows, to then it being like me and Damon hosting every interview for the live show, like one of us doing it, right? And then like me getting the talk show and doing Up at Noon and doing all this stuff. It was because people noticed that I was just on another level for talking to people, which when you boil it down to that is ridiculous, of course, but it was the journalism side and it was the interview side and it was, for me, which I never expected, removing the pen and paper, right? Like I have one of the worst memories, I would say. Like you've heard me on the shows, like when did PlayStation 4 come out? And I'm like, fuck, I lived it and I was at IGN, so it's like I do that kind of shit. Like I have a terrible long-term memory, great short-term memory, and I'm a good active listener, and that all comes from it. So active listening is the complete opposite of the yellow notepad interview. The yellow notepad interview, which is how I think most people would think an interview goes, is how everyone starts doing interviews, right? Is you sit there and you write out your 7 questions, your 10 questions, your 11 questions, whatever it is, your numbered questions, right? And you get the interview subject and you go, what's your favorite color? And they go, well, when I grew up, my mom was a painter and X, Y, and Z, so I always liked the color blue. And you go, great, next question. Well, like, wait, whoa. Active listening in that interview is, I'm talking to you about science. I'm talking to you about whatever. I'm talking to you about video games. Go back to your mom being a painter. What was that all about? You know what I mean? Like that. It's actively listening to what the subject says and pulling on those threads. And I'd like to imagine, I don't know, this is where you have to tell me, I'd like to imagine that's why you like the podcasts I do with people where I talk to them and interview them, right? Is that I'm actively listening in the moment and hopefully pulling on those threads and asking the right questions and doing the right thing. The example I always give on a much more broader scope is I had, for years, obviously, seen Erin Andrews, who's she's a sports reporter. She's been on everything. I don't know where she is actually right now even. But at this time, she was on ESPN, I think Sunday Night Football. Or whatever. It was one of the, maybe it was Monday Night Football, maybe it was Sunday Night Football. It doesn't matter. Seen her for years, knew her work, thought she was fine, right? I don't know anything about her. But I was on a plane, flying, wherever, who the fuck knows, you know how much I fly. And it was, I'm going to get all this wrong too, it was the 49ers versus, it might have been the Eagles, I'm rusty on this one, right? but it was the Crabtree thing. Come for our legs, blah, blah, blah. And I'm screwing up even who it was. Bad long-term memory, right? Anyways, though. Yeah, it was Roundtree and Crab. No, it was whatever. It doesn't matter. There was two football players who had got into it on the football field. And so in the post-game interview, the stupid ones where you're walking off the sidelines, everybody's winded, nobody's saying anything of value whatsoever. Aaron Andrews grabbed, and I can picture his fucking face. I want to say he was an Eagle. Shit, I'm so sorry. Like he's watching this. What's going on? And he was like so fired up, and he was just talking like pretty much nonsense, right? They want to come for our legs. Oh, yeah, blah, blah. And I remember on the plane watching, and I got there late, and I'm like, who are you talking about? And like literally, I said it to myself, and Aaron Andrews goes, "Who are you talking about?" And he's like, and he looked at a Crabtree, blah blah, blah. And it was like, it was such an obvious question that I think so many people could have steamrolled past. Where if you'd watched the game, you probably knew who he was talking about. And like, again, these are usually nonsense things, so I'm sure you have somebody in your ear asking you to get whatever, to get the soundbite, blah, 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 you know what I mean? And she nailed it. And I'd like to think that's what I sometimes, maybe not all the time, accomplish, where it is, let's talk about the thing, let's go to the thing, and da-da-da-da-da, and let's ask the obvious questions. Now, I think I'm a great top-level interview. A personal interview. And what I usually approach those things, I would say, from not John Q. Public, you don't know anything, but like we all have the shared information of what video games are, and then you step into that. What I mean by this is that, I'll watch Michael Rosenbaum on Inside of You, right? Who's else? There was somebody else I was watching. Oh, Sean Evans, obviously, on Hot Ones, right? And both Sean and Michael do like copious research where they're like, you said this and you did this in this thing, and like you'll see it in the Sean Evans. I've seen compilations of people being like, how did you get this? How do you know? You know what I mean? Like he's asking very insightful things about their history. Granted, he has a research team and yada yada yada. I usually stay away from that because I've been trained to inverted pyramid, right? From journalism, let's start with the broadest, most accessible information, right, and then drill down to something more specific. But then even IGN, and kind of funny to a degree, right, you have people showing up who love games and want to hear about a game, but haven't necessarily, paid attention to every dev diary, every blog, every update, everything, right? So for preparing for an interview, it really ranges. Where I think you look at the DC Universe Online one, which we just did, right, which I was happy with. I didn't think it set the world on fire. And I don't even mean, like, I made a joke about this in the show, right? I made a joke about this in today's Kind of Funny podcast. I made a whole opening bit about it, right? But, like, I didn't expect that to do numbers. That's, again, the power of this Gamescast schedule we have now, where it's like, we can do passion projects, and I can sit there and be like, yo, this game's been around for 13 years. That's really cool. Let's talk about it, right? And we did that, and I don't think we ever got super deep into the game, nor do I think we stayed super surface level. Like, I like to think we got in there, but I don't think there was no breakout, there was no clip out, there was no, like, how have you been around for 13 years? There wasn't a great answer from the developers, right? But again, there rarely is a turnkey sound bite to answer that kind of question. It was just a nice discussion of what they've accomplished, what it's like to take the reins of this thing, because the one guy has only been there 6 months. Like, there's a bunch of stuff there, right? You can then look at the Todd Howard one, right? And it was a similar thing where it's like, Todd's Todd. I'm lucky enough to know him well enough. And it's that idea of like, I'm lucky enough to know those games well enough, right? And when it was all said and done, the one thing somebody put in the comments was like, wow, no questions about Elder Scrolls 6. And I was like, you know what? I did miss that. Like, I had it in my notes, and at one point we touched on it of like that being in the timeline, but I didn't ask anything specific, which I should have, of like, how's that coming? How far out are we yet? And like, again, you would have got a non-answer, but a lot of Todd's non-answers were breakoutable and were quotable and were newsworthyable or whatever. So, like, whatever. The idea there, but both those interviews, right, for me, who's been doing this a long time, let alone talking to people professionally and asking questions a long time, I didn't write out any questions for any of those, right? Like, in my run a show for Todd, I put, like, bullet points of, like, Fallout expansion, you know what I mean, Starfield expansion, like, you know what I mean? Just so, like, if we were so out in the weeds, having fun talking and actively listening and, me piggybacking off of things he said, I didn't want it to be that I missed. Oh, fuck, I forgot to, like, kind of what I do with Elder Scrolls. Oh, fuck, we didn't really ever touch on that the way I wanted to. But again, let's talk about me. It's my interview, right? And I'm trying to serve you guys, the audience, and yada, 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 but, like, I don't really care about Elder Scrolls. I'll play it, I'm sure. But it's, like, not, like, a burning thing, and I'm sure he doesn't have any real answers for it, so it's like, what's the point of me actually asking that question when I could be talking about Fallout, when I could be talking about something that Starfield, something that means more to me, right? So, nowadays, long story short, what I'm saying is, how do I prepare for an interview, right? Like, I'm very blessed and lucky that I'm usually just interviewing people and scheduling the stuff that I want to do. So, like, DC Universe Online was a very simple, let's read through the latest press release about what the new Brainiac DLC is. And then I went back and I read my first interviews with Jim Lee and watched a couple little things like that, and obviously brought the art in and the gift they gave me when I beat cancer and stuff like that. Like, that was the prep for that. For Todd, it was very similar. I think I went through and gathered, like, again, I'm terrible with dates, for, like, when was Fallout out? What was this gap? Like, more of the stats than the meat and the conversation of it, because I knew I can carry that, I can do that kind of thing. And so it's a different ball of wax every time around, right? Like, I think when you look at the old E3 things, it would be, okay, cool, like, that's an interesting one, right? Because so many of the E3 interviews I would do were, okay, you're going to be interviewing X, Y, and Z developer about this new game, but it doesn't get announced until the PlayStation conference, right? So you have to wait for the conference, watch the thing there, which you'd be doing no matter what, and then, look at maybe go read a blog that they put up, maybe do something. Because E3 is always great because everyone's kind of starting, for the most part, from the same zero of, like, all right, we know nothing about this, what do we do with that? Comic-Con, Comic-Con was always the Wild West, where it would be just, cool, Aubrey Plaza is coming to sit down and talk about her new movie, and there's a trailer out that maybe I've seen or whatever, and it's like, well, Eric Goldman's on that. He knows the actual stuff. I just need to be the liquid there, right? Like, I'm the host. I'll get you in. I'll tee you up. Eric asks the real questions. I make a joke here or there or whatever, and we all have a good time talking about this movie. Get over, 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 get over. Lord almighty, you know what I mean? Just hit the fucking gas. We merge here. It's so simple. If you accelerate and I decelerate, we're fine. But when you're trying to get on and we match speeds, that's a problem. Anyway, there's a million different things, but it's the old joke I give you all the time, right? Of, like, tonight, 3 a.m., somebody could kick in my door, turn on and have the camera light on and toss a microphone in bed, and I'd be, what's up, everybody? And I'd be able to go. I like to think that I'd be able to interview a Rock, not the Rock. I could interview the Rock, but a Rock. Like, I can keep that. I mean, look at this. This is a fun exercise, right? You talk about, like, I talk about it all the time. The fact that podcasting and interviewing and writing and all that jazz, right, is a muscle. And so you need to work it out. You need, like, what I always talk about when I look back at my story of in the 4th grade, I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to review video games. I wanted to write for EGM and GamePro, right? EGM, really. But anyways, I wanted to write about video games. I look at that story, and I know so many people find it inspiring, and I look at it and I go, what the fuck was your problem, Greg? Why didn't you write then? Why didn't you write? You know what I mean? You wanted to write about games. You knew you wanted to write about games. Write about fucking games. Every game I played, I should have written a review for. Even if it was just like, oh, EGM, second opinions are 200 words or 500 words or whatever it was. Like, just write that. Just do that. I never, ever, ever, ever thought to do that. You know what I mean? And I think that's so crazy. Anyways, though, so what I'm talking about here, though, right? Like, think of the exercise that Gregway is for me. Every day for now 18 minutes or so, I solo podcast. And I like to think, you tell me, I don't miss a beat. Obviously, the ums and the ahs and fucking merge, like, that's filler and that's my brain switching gears and that's whatever, but I like to think you're getting an entertaining show. I don't know. I mean, you keep coming back and people keep subscribing for it, and that's awesome, and I love that. So it seems to be working. And obviously, I've talked to you about it before on this show. I really consider these Gregway vlogs to be my journal, right? Like, I would love to actually journal, but I'd much rather play Starfield when I get home. And, when I finally get that free time, I would love to sit down and play a game, do a thing, whatever, talk to Jen, rather than sit there and write, right? So these actually actively serve as my daily diary, my daily journal, these stories to be condensed and consolidated into pieces of advice here. But again, it's me talking and just while I drive going, right? Which I think wakes my brain up to be ready to go games daily when I get in there in 27 minutes, right? To go, so it's like I've already done a show by the time I get to work, so hopefully I'm on, so hopefully I'm loose and limber, so I'm ready to make the connections, the jumps, the jokes, the whatever. Like, think about how hard this is. And this isn't me patting myself on the back, but I don't know what your life is and what you do, but go ahead. Turn the camera around and do a vlog. Just vlog about whatever you want to vlog about and do it for 19 minutes right now. This isn't me throwing it in your face. I'm just saying that, like, you got to crawl before you can walk, before you can run. And so if you were to go back at IGN 2007 and be like, Greg, vlog every day like this, not a fucking chance. I'd overthink it. I'd worry about everything. Go look at the original Gregway blogs that used to live on youtube.com/GameOverGreggy, of course, now kind of funny. They're still out there. They're still up. And they are very much like, they're not this. I guess that's the thing. They're not this. Where when I go and I look at a old Gregway, which I had to when we did the final DCEU in review, and we got that amazing edit that showed, like, and it's like, just listening to me talk about Superman Returns was such a oof. Like, I don't think about how far I've come. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think about the fact that you look at that and that's, what, we're about to be 10 now, so that's 12, 13 years ago. And it's like, wow, I definitely have gotten better at presenting. Like, I feel, you know, again, there's a pomp and circumstance. There's a bring your energy up. You're presenting, you're talking, da-da-da. But again, like, I've said this about podcasting before, right? Like, this is who I wish I was all the time. Like, this is an energy expenditure. So, of course, when I get home and crash out on the ground and talk to Jen, I'm not this nailing my pronunciation and this energetic and that. Like, you know, I'm talking like a normal human being would talk to somebody else. And it's like, that's not that far off of this. I would again say this is like what? I mean, I'm not even screaming right now, right? So this is probably a full-on 10 versus a 7 or a 6, depending on how energetic you are when you get home kind of thing. I wish this was me all the time, but this is who I am. You know what I mean? We're getting into a Batman Bruce Wayne business, right? Where it's like, Batman is Batman. Bruce Wayne is the disguise. When Batman is in his head, he says he's Batman. He thinks of himself as Batman. He doesn't think of himself as Bruce, right? Like, this is who I want to be. This is who I think my true being is, my true self is. But again, this is like, if I was I know this is fucking insulting to many people, but stick with me. If I was a marathon runner, I imagine that when they're running the marathon and they're feeling great and they're doing the damn thing, like, this is who I am. You know what I mean? Like, me just fucking talking and pontificating and I think delivering fun stuff in a product, like, this is who I am and who I like to be. It's like when we go on vacation or have a week off and Jen jokes around about how it gets all pent up and then I have to release it in odd, stupid ways where I'm being a giggling idiot or I'm fucking podcasting with her in the car. Like, this is what I want. This is me burning bright. This is me burning bright. This is me being who I like being. And so anyways, that's the key to a good interview, I guess. The point of all of this is active listening. Ask the obvious question. You know what I mean? You know, I think you gotta ask the obvious question. You gotta not be afraid to ask the uncomfortable questions. I think the other one, you know what I mean? Like, you know, it was interesting live during the Hellblade interview when I asked about the studio closures and when I asked about the marketing. Chat was very much like, holy shit, I didn't expect them to do that. Props to you, Greg. It's a non-answer, blah, blah, blah. And then after the fact, VOD people, not a lot, but like the Hellblade subreddit was very much like, that crossed the line. What the fuck? Da-da-da-da-da. Like, why would you ask this person there? And I found that fascinating because, like, I understand those people's perspective as Hellblade fans, but again, they came on our show, which is an industry-wide show, which isn't just one thing, nor is it, even though many people would argue, it's not a fluff thing. It often is because we love talking about games and yada, 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 but like when Phil Spencer came on, he knew he'd get hard questions. When these people came on, they knew they'd get that. And if they weren't prepared to get those, if they didn't want to get those, then they shouldn't come on this show. And if we were told, well, you can't ask the obvious question for these people, we'd say, well, all right, we passed in the interview. So yeah, you got to stand for something or fall for everything, I guess. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm at the office. I think I kind of did this, but this was a fun exercise. feel free to ask other questions. If you have follow-ups for this one, things I didn't touch on or glanced over, let me know. And we'll get back to it when Greg continues to teach journalism.